Chapter 31. Baffled. We must go back to the moment when Ralph saw his uncle leave the room, fell the guard, and speed away through the mazy passages. He followed as well as he was able, for he was wholly unacquainted with the situation of the different cells and the way which led to them. Every few moments Ralph paused to listen, to catch the sound of the squire's footsteps, and then hurried on. At last there was a moment of utter silence, then he heard the sharp clang of a heavy bolt as it was drawn from its socket, then the noise of an opening door, after which an almost satanic laugh echoed through those low vaults as Squire Moulton at last reached his victim. Ralph crept cautiously nearer. He did not wish to be seen by his uncle, and resolved not to interfere in any way, unless he should attempt violence. "Ha," he heard the squire say, tauntingly, "I thought I'd bring you news of the wedding." Ralph could not catch the next word, though he strained his ears to do so, "has wedded the wealthy little lady, as I told you he would, and deeming it likely that you would be anxious to learn when it was all nicely over, I came to tell you." "Cease, babbler, and leave, I would be alone," replied Mr. Ellerton, commandingly. "Oh, ho! Command the rocks to open and set you free, perhaps they will hear and obey," was the sneering retort. "But I cannot obey you just yet, you know, I promised to return to you again, and I always keep promises of this kind, especially when I have a purpose to accomplish." Mr. Ellerton bowed his head wearily upon his hands and made no reply. The evil-hearted squire went on, sneeringly, "Nice little match, that of Ralph Ellerton's. I presume you will be interested to know that he will now have the command of 3 fortunes. You have always taken such an interest in the lad's welfare that it must be pleasing to you to know of his present good luck. Miss Dupont's, or rather Mrs. Ellerton's fortune, united with my own, and then yours on the top of that, will make quite a little pile, amounting in all to about $2 millions. You perceive I keep posted about these things." "Villain! Will you hold your peace?" demanded Mr. Ellerton, exasperated nearly beyond control. He raised his head again, and sharply scrutinized the face of his enemy, and grew a shade paler at the diabolical purpose he saw written there. He saw at once that the man meant to take his life. Step by step the squire approached nearer to his victim, until only a short space remained between them. In a stern, authoritative tone, Mr. Ellerton cried out, "Back, villain! Do not dare to take another step, or you shall pay dearly for it." The wretch leered fearfully at him, and, with a shrill, mocking laugh, glided still nearer. "Do you think I fear you?" he asked, "or that I have come here unprepared to defend myself? Look!" The squire drew a long, slender dagger from his bosom as he spoke, and held it up before the face of his victim. "This beautiful little instrument," he said, lightly feeling its edge with one long, bony finger, "is poisoned, and one scratch would send you to your long-lost and lovely bride, she who ought to have been mine, and whom you stole from me. Curses on you!" His deepest passions began to be stirred, as they always were when his mind reverted to the fancied wrongs of long ago. "But," he continued, "my revenge will soon be complete, for I am going to stab you to the heart with this, and then watch you while you die. Oh, it will be a feast to my eyes, a joy to my soul." "No, no, better not try that," he said, as Ellerton made a motion as if to seize the weapon from his hand. "Remember, the merest trick will prove fatal and cause you tenfold more suffering. Better take it quietly to your heart at once and have it over with. You will meet Jessie then all the sooner." 179. "Oh, heavens, what a monster!" moaned the wretched man. His heart sickened within him as he realized his horrible situation. The fiend bent near to him, he could feel his hot breath against his cheek, see the pupil of his eye dilate and then contract with the deadly purpose of his heart shining through them. The squire raised his arm high above his head, while his long, bony fingers firmly clutched the handle of the dagger. For a moment it quivered in the air, then it descended toward his foe with full force. But it missed its destination, for his arm was fiercely arrested in its downward motion, and with a howl of baffled rage, the squire turned to see who had cheated him of his long-wished-for revenge. He met the stern face and flashing eyes of his nephew. He was pale as the dead, and he shook with the excitement of the dreadful moment, but his hold upon his uncle was like the grip of a vice, and the murderous wretch could no more move his arm under it than if he had been an infant. Ralph pulled him roughly from his intended victim, and said, hoarsely, "I told you that you should not do this thing. Curse you, I will," he shrieked, frantically striving to free himself. "He shall not live, I will have his black heart to pay me for what I have suffered. Let me go, you young dog. Oh, it was treacherous in you to cheat me so, when my triumph was so near. Help! Help, I will be free." The baffled wretch writhed and twisted in the iron grasp that held him. His eyes grew bloodshot, his face became of a purple hue, while flecks of foam flew from his mouth. Gaining renewed courage from his almost miraculous deliverance, Mr. Ellerton struck his foe a powerful blow, which felled him to the floor, and sent the fatal dagger flying to the farthest corner of the room. "Now," said Ralph, "if you have a cord anywhere, we will bind this dangerous gentleman until he recovers his senses. It will not do to let him run at large." Mr. Ellerton picked up the weapon that had so nearly put an end to his existence, and, quickly stepping to the stout bell rope, severed it with a single blow. Then together they firmly bound the squire's arms behind him, wholly unmindful of his curses and shrieks. When this was accomplished, Mr. Ellerton turned to Ralph, and said gratefully, "Young man, I know not who you are, whether friend or foe, but you have saved my life, and for this I am inexpressibly thankful." "I ask no thanks, I have simply done my duty," replied Ralph, quietly and coldly, though he gazed searchingly in the other's face. Then, after a moment, he added, while the hot blood rushed over his features, "Perhaps it is right that you should know who I am. My name is Ralph Moulton Ellerton." "You," he gasped, staggering back as if someone had struck him. "Yes, sir, and, of course, with your blood flowing in my veins, I could not see him do this thing," returned the young man. "Ah, my friend, I know what you think, and I assure you you have been grossly deceived about your history, and are not so much to be blamed for the part you have taken against me and mine." "What? Do you mean still to deny our relationship?" asked Ralph, an indignant sparkle replacing the former cold glitter of his eye. "I have never denied the true relationship existing between us. But I have never wronged you, neither have I ever done you any good. How could I, when you were in the hands of my bitterest foe? Had he not taken you, believe me, I would never have allowed you to suffer," said his companion, earnestly. Ralph gazed at him half wonderingly. He could not doubt the truthful look which he saw upon his face, yet he asked severely, "Do you mean to say that you have never done me wrong in denying your own flesh and blood, and have you never done me wrong in the injury you have done my mother? What am I if I am not your son? You are not my son. I swear it. I told you that you had been cruelly deceived. You are the son of my brother, who married your mother in secret, or rather, without consulting his friends, and shame be upon him, deserted her soon after your birth." "Is this true?" demanded Ralph, pale and faint. "Every word of it, as sure as there is a heaven above us." "Is this true?" he asked again, turning fiercely to his uncle. He would not answer, but remained sitting doggedly silent. But that silence was answer enough. It convinced Ralph, who cried brokenly, "If you have deceived me with this awful lie, I will have no mercy upon you." "Oh! If it is true, what have I done? May heaven and you forgive me, sir, for I have bent all my energies toward your own and your son's ruin, believing that you had done me this great wrong, and desiring to be revenged upon you for it." He covered his face with his hands and groaned aloud. Mr. Ellerton went to him and laid a hand gently on his shoulder, saying, "My boy, I believe you, and I freely forgive you for all you may have been influenced to do in this affair. I know what a black-hearted wretch yonder man is, and feel that he alone will have to answer for all these crimes. But I will explain all to your satisfaction some other time. Did you come to give me liberty? I see the door is open, am I to go free? I am anxious to see my son, whom I know has been a prisoner here like myself. Yes, sir, all within these vaults are now free, except the smugglers, whose den it has been for so many years. But please answer me one more question before I lead you to your son. Are my father and mother living? I know not, replied Mr. Ellerton, sadly. My brother suddenly disappeared and went to California. I have never seen him since, and your mother I can tell you nothing of. She went away soon after he left her, and I have never heard from her since. I supposed she was dead, as the squire had taken you. Ask him where she is, he ought to know, for she was his sister, he said, pointing to the squire. You told me she was not your sister, but your cousin, you reprobate, thundered Ralph, turning to the squire, who was now writhing beneath the words which proved his lies. But he lifted his head defiantly, and sneered, Yes, I've told you a good many things. That were false? Questioned his nephew, with angry eagerness. Some were true, and some were false, was the dogged reply. It is enough, replied Ralph, with an ominous calmness. Then, turning again to Mr. Ellerton, he said, We will talk of this again, but come now, and I will take you to your son. You, sir, must go also. There will perhaps be some explanations to be made which will require your presence, he said to his uncle. They each took an arm, and led the baffled wretch back through the passages whence he came so jubilantly but a short while before. They entered the principal room, placed him under guard, and then Ralph, with a humble air, led Mr. Ellerton toward the group where he saw Robert conversing with Madame Alroyd. He then immediately retired to a distant part of the room, and sat down to nurse his sorrow and remorse alone.